tell us that the tzitzis were tied properly and that somebody said l'shem mitzvah still tzitzis.
Good luck, everybody. If you can mute yourself, that'd be greatly appreciated.
Oh.
Good luck. Shvua Tov. We're actually going to do 2 blot tonight. So we'll do a blot and pause. If anybody wants to stay on, fine. Otherwise, we'll be recorded on YouTube and Spotify and all that. We're up to Kufyu Bay. You give them on the base on the bottom. Let's start straight away. We're up to here, Omar Rava, about 5 lines to the bottom of the page. So Omar Rava said, Hani de daida dori b'toichatchum. Those goyim that have animals that they sell they sell animals, but they also have their animals wandering about and fertilizing fields. You're not permitted to buy any animals from them. And why is that the case? If it's within the vicinity of the city. Also, you're not buying an animal from them. My time of wine, they're not very careful, and they end up sometimes Yiddish cows that belong to Yidden end up with theirs, and they don't return them, so they have stolen animals. But if it's chutz, if it's outside the vicinity of the city, the chances of having a cow from the city lost and joining them is nigh. It's not practical, or it's not likely. But so then you're permitted to buy. But if you see the owner chasing after them, even outside the chum, and say, "Hey, give me back my cow," then I feel a chutz chum. Also, you're not allowed to purchase from them. Machriz Rav made an announcement. We tame Rav Huna. Others say Rav Huna. The Salkin le'ela, all those who travel upwards, that's to Israel, or the Nachtin l'sata, all those who are traveling downwards, which is basically coming down here to Babel. Hi Bar Yisrael. This is the law. Interesting law. If you're summoned to go to a Goyish court to testify against the Yid, for example, the din is as follows. If the Goyish court follows similar rules as the Yiddish court, and you are summoned to go to a court, then you're allowed to go and testify. Even though you're causing the Yid a loss, because the Yiddish law agrees with this particular outcome. But if in a Jewish court it wouldn't hold, then you're not allowed to testify in that court. And there are 2 versions of the Gemara. One version of the Gemara is not what I just told you. The Riv's version of the Gemara is what I just told you, that if you were summoned to court, you're not allowed to go if you were not, if it doesn't follow the Torah. The other version is what our Gemara says inside, as we'll see. Hi Bar Yisrael Yid, the Yodas Adusi Lakusi. You knew testimony that would support the Goy's claim. But you were not asked to come. Nobody asked you, nobody subpoenaed you, but you decided to volunteer and help the Goy out. Is the Kusi al Yisrael Chavre. You're going to help out Bedine the Kusi al Yisrael Chavre. You're going to help out in the Goyish court against the Yid. And the problem is that the laws are not consonant with ours. Then Mishamtin will place you in Chedim, my time of the Inu Mafkim Amoina, because they take money out of Puma the Chad. We're on the very top of the page. Kuf Yud Dalad Amar Aleph, the first words. Because the Goyish courts, they accept the testimony of a single witness, and we don't. So if you're the lone witness, you cannot go. So if you're the lone witness, I will betray loy. But if there were 2 witnesses and you're just one of them, you're allowed to go. So in our version, you were not subpoenaed, so you put in the chedim, which means according to our version, if you were subpoenaed, then maybe you're allowed to go, even if it's not what the Torah wants. However, the Riz version is even if you're subpoenaed, if the rule that they're going to follow do not follow the Torah, you shouldn't go. You should put you in the chedim. However, he continues. The chad even by one witness. When do we say you shouldn't attend? Only in a small provincial court that they don't really know the laws. If you go to a proper court, they also don't follow the testimony of a witness. All they do is one witness and make you swear. Then their laws are very similar to ours. However, if there's a case of a Chil Hashem, if you're subpoenaed and if you don't go to Chil Hashem, then you have to go because Chil Hashem is a dangerous thing. In other words, they know and you don't want to help out the Goyim, so who knows what they'll do in return. Amar Rav Ashi said, Ki havina bei Rav Huna. Rav Ashi said when we were in Yeshiva Rav Huna, which is impossible. because Rav Ashi was not a student by Rav Huna. Rav Ashi was born when Rava passed away, and Rava was a student of Rabba, Rav Chizda, and Rav Huna was much older, so it's impossible. So others, so others say that maybe it wasn't really Rav Huna, but somebody else. Ibayla, this is a question. Adam Chashav, this person is a very eminent scholar. There's some chilek today that some people trust whatever he says equal to two people. It's quite possible that the court is going to rely on his testimony, even though he's one witness. Maybe he shouldn't testify because they might rely on him. And in our courts of law, that is not considered a proper testimony, so he shouldn't be there. Ideal, perhaps, even though since he's a chashuv person, he can't wiggle his way out because they know that you have testimony, and if you don't come, you can pose all kinds of dangers for the Eden. So therefore, he's allowed to testify. Teiku. We remain with a question. Amar Rav Ashi says, we have a concept called bar metzger. Bar metzger means is that if you have a house to sell and you have a Jewish neighbor, that Jewish neighbor should have first right of purchase. And if they don't want to purchase, then you sell to anybody you want. But this din is primarily focused on the buyer. The one who did the wrong thing here really is the buyer. Because the buyer should not have bought a property. You know the neighbor is interested. And in fact, we say if the buyer bought it, we tell the buyer to give it back. If somebody can please mute themselves. So the Gemara therefore says, what happens if a goy sells a house to a person, and this person is right next to a Yiddish house, and the Yid said, hey, I wanted to buy the house. You're my bar metzger, especially if the focus is on the buyer. Maybe he has the right to say to the buyer, I'm going to force you to pass on to me the house for the price that you paid. Does the law bar metzger apply in this case? So Amar Rav Ashi, hi by Yisrael, this Jewish person, this person who sold a property to a guy, a mitzvah by Yisrael, bordering a Jewish property, Chavre, his friend, they'll put him in cherem. You just, put the Jewish neighbor in harm's way. You sold the property to a guy. My time, Mr. Gemara wants to know why are we so coming down so harshly to this Yid? Are we applying the rules of Bametzah? Didn't we learn that these rules don't apply to a guy? Zavin me'akum, if you purchase from a guy, or zavin la'akum, or you sold to a guy. Lekum shudin Bametzah. Now, if you sold to a guy, it's not Bametzah because the guy is the buyer and he doesn't have these rules. But if you bought from a guy, remember the main focus is on the buyer. Why doesn't the laws of Bametzah apply here? The reason is very simple. He turns around to the Yiddish neighbor and says, look, whatever it is, you're better off now than yesterday. Yesterday you had a non-Jewish neighbor. Today you have a Jewish neighbor.
Today you got a Jewish neighbor.
Exactly. So it's much better. Yeah. So I already did. Could we learn from a pasuk about Sisa Yoshev Atayim? You should do the right thing. I did the right thing. I made sure that you have a Jewish neighbor. So therefore, there's no bar metzah there. So what's wrong if a Jew sells a house to a guy neighboring a Jewish house? El Amalek, the Jew says to him, you brought a lion to my house over here. And therefore, Mishamtin, you put me in danger. Mishamtinle will place cherem on this Yid who bought the house. He has to accept upon himself any harm that will come the Jewish way, he takes full responsibility. We're talking about over here where the Yid was prepared to pay for the house, and the neighbor, and this Yid went and zumped him. If this din of selling to you're not allowed to sell to a guy, but Yid is only, as the Rishonim say, only if the Yid was prepared to pay the market value. The Yid didn't want to pay the market value, but a discount, and the guy was prepared to pay the market value, then the seller doesn't have to take a loss in that case. What happens if the guy offers, so the Yiddish neighbor offered market value, the guy really wants the house, and he's prepared to pay an amount that far exceeds the market value. The Russian, a number of Rishonim say, in that case there, you must sell it to the Yid. Even though you could have made more money by selling to the guy, but once it's above the market value, you have to go back to the halacha, which says the Jewish neighbor, has priority. Others don't necessarily agree. But let me just tell you that in the late 60s in America, in Brooklyn, there was the sickness that if a non-Jew moved into a Jewish street, like where I lived, the entire street was Jewish. The moment a non-Jew moved into the street, everybody fled. Within a year, there's not one Jewish house left. And as a result of that, the price of real estate plummeted. A house might have been $50,000, but the moment the first non-Jew moved in, the house became 49, then 48, 47. It just went down and down and down. And this was happening in all the frum neighborhoods in Brooklyn. So many Jews ran to Long Island and other parts of New York or other places. So the Lubavitcher put out 2 letters. And based on this Gemara here, and Shulchan Aruch on this Gemara here, he spoke about how people who are selling their houses to non-Jews instead of offering it to Jews, they are ganavim, because they're stealing money from every Jew on the block. They're mazikim, and it says right here, he's supposed to put them in chayrim. And basically very, very strong letters. And a bunch of rabbis endorsed what the Rebbe wrote, and they send it out to everybody. So what it initially did was it stopped the plague that everybody was running away. But we lost whole neighborhoods, like East Flatbush, Canarsie. We lost whole neighborhoods, and most of Crown Heights at that time, because of this fear that people had. Where it came from, I have no idea. But that's what happened. So, and slowly over time, things turn around and people start coming back. But it's all based on this Gemara right here. Okay, Mishnah. Now, we know that we already discussed that tax collectors, depends what kind of tax collector. So the king, the government, they used to on-sell the right for taxes. And they would say, well, we have to collect $1,000. If you give me $800 up front, you can buy those rights and you go collect $1,000. Just like they sell loans. So banks sell their loans, same thing. So and then we said that tax collectors can be ganavim if the guy appointed himself to become a tax collector, or if the king didn't really give him a fixed amount, so then he does whatever he wants, and they're considered ganavim. They're considered ganavim. So the Mishnah talks about one of those kind of tax collectors. They were honest tax collectors. The king gave them a fixed amount, and that's all they collected. Says the Mishnah, notlu muchsin. So this tax collector. A tax collector is like a gazlan, brazen, open. Everyone knows they're ganavim, and they don't care. They don't shy away from it. They have so much authority vested in them. Notlu muchsin es chamayr. So these tax collectors came and confiscated your donkey. The nasna le chamayr achat, and they replaced it with another donkey, but inferior quality donkey, and it's definitely a stolen donkey. So the question is, can you keep it, or not to list him? Listim is like a muhsin is a gazlan, then listim is a ganif, one who's much more clandestine. Esksusay, confiscated your dress. They left behind another garment which is worth a lot less. You're allowed to keep them. If they are bailim misyayishim, you assume that the owners abandoned hope and they're miyayish. And we have over here Yush and Shinir Rishus, or Yeyush and Shinir Rishus. The owner was miyayish. And then the ganif passed it on to you. So that Shinir and Yehush combined with Shinir Rishus, you're allowed to keep it, as we learned in the Samach Vov Samazayin. That's the first part of the Mishnah. Next part of the Mishnah. If you rescue something from a river, the river overflowed, its banks and swept away a whole bunch of stuff. And a geyser from the army, a listim, or from listim. Again, we're talking about robbers. But here the Mishnah says, if you are aware that the owners abandon hope, then you keep it. So only if you heard, which is a contradiction. The first part of the Mishnah says we assume they abandon hope, and this part of the Mishnah about robbers, and here it says if you heard. And the Gemara will reconcile that. And the Gemara has a fascinating commentary on life, as you'll see. If you have an army of bees that they just flew from one place to another. In this Yaishu, they disappeared, and you ban hope of recovering the bees. Whichever property they came to, you can keep. Again, it says it provided that you heard that the owners were Miyash. You believe people who are not qualified to be witnesses, that they can say that the bees came from this area. You're allowed to trespass your friend's field. You're allowed to trespass someone else's field to save your bees. As a result of that, you pay whatever damage you made. Somebody please can mute themselves.
Even bother with the invitation.
If no, you should not chop down.
So I will tell him tomorrow.
If somebody can please.
I don't think this rabbi will be marrying them because at this stage they.
Robert, can you mute yourself, please?
Oh, sorry.
Yakoitz as soichoi. Do not chop down a branch. Let's say all the bees decided to reside on this branch. Do not chop down the branch. I'm not leaving sadamim in order, and then say, I'll compensate you, because that's you're proactively destroying someone else's property. Rabbi Shmuel, but Rabbi Shmuel, the son of Rabbi Yechim, says, I've koitzitz v'noisism. You're allowed to chop down the trees, as we'll see later, Yeshua. When they conquered Israel, they made a number of, we learned before that Yeshua made a number of conditions that, as a society, we have to be tolerant of certain behaviors, and this is one of them. And Gemara will discuss that. Tana, we learned, in a Bryce, we learned that contradicts our Mishnah. Our Mishnah said that if the tax collector gave you a donkey or a garment, you can keep it because the guy was meyayish. But the Bryce says the opposite. It says, if you took this donkey, you got to give back to the real owner. Because Kasava, the Bryce holds, Yish Kadi like honey. That Yish is not koine. And it came into your hand illegally. We have a contradiction. Now, the question is, why is it that you can't keep it? Isn't it Yish and Shini Rishus? Why can't you keep it? So either they hold that Yish and Shini Rishus, the Bryce holds, is also not good enough, or Taisus Nafsam Zayin says, when do we say it's considered Shina Resus? You change the ownership is if you bought it legally and you transferred the item from the Ganav to you. Over here, you didn't come and take it. The Ganav, the Muhsin, they gave it to you whether you like it or not. So therefore, it's considered as if you're an extension of the Ganav. This is all part of their robbery, and it's not considered like a new owner stepped in. The Ikram is another version of the second brayso, which then would agree with our Mishnah. The Amr say, you don't have to give it back. It's yours. But if you want to be a mensch and give it back, fine. My time of why Yish is kind. I feel guilty keeping someone's money. Is that mine? And then give it back to the original owner. Says the Gemara, you're allowed to keep it because the owner is definitely with Miyayish. So Amr Abashi, first he makes a comment, and then we're going to talk about the contradiction in our Mishnah. Our Mishnah starts off saying probably you were meyayish by the muhsin, and then the Mishnah says if you heard that they were meyayish by the robbers. What's going on here? Kamala Rashi says an interesting thing. When do we say that you probably abandoned hope if the Ganav was a goy? Have at least in Yisrael, if the Ganav was a yid, you don't abandon hope. Why? Because the following day, I'll take him to Din Torah. I'm sure I'll get my items back. Maskiv lo Rabbi Yosef. Yosef asked him again. It can't be Rav Ashi because Rabbi Yosef did not live in the same time of Ashi. Some say it's Rav Asi. So Rabbi Yosef asked, Adrabah, on the contrary, Ivcha mistabra. Now this is very interesting what he says here. Akum, if a goy steals from you and you can take him to a goyish court, you're much more confident that you'll get the stolen goods back. The Daine Begesa, the goyish court, they're vested with authority, and if they paskin that if this guy owes you this item, if he doesn't return to you, the police will come and take it or put him in jail. Is lemiyais, you want to abandon hope. But Yisrael a Yid, where are you going to take them to the Torah? Even the Omri Maiman, all they do is they yak away, all they do is they talk, they say, okay, you have to do something, but they have no power or authority. Then Miyaish will abandon hope. That's one version. The other version of Rashi is that a court also, a bezin also has plenty of power. They can put you in cherim. They can make sure you don't get buried in the Jewish cemetery. You're not counted. They can do all kinds of things. But the bezin doesn't just take, doesn't accept your word. They're going to start asking Meimar, the Amri Meimar, they're going to say, how do we know that this item ever belonged to you? How do you know that this guy actually stole it? Bring witnesses and so on. They'll make the life very difficult. The proof will be very onerous. We learn in the Sefer. It says, the matzav and akum. If you say from a listing, it says in our Mishnah, if you say from a guy from the army or from the listing robbers, if the bailam, yeah, you keep it. Stam but stam you can't. But the first part of the Mishnah says you could. So lo yishanu ela akum. We're talking about a goy. Only by a goy do we say that you're confident to get it back. Should the daine begisi, because therefore you're not going to be miyayish. Well, the first part of the Mishnah that you are miyayish is from at least in Yisrael, Jewish robber. Keep now remember miyayish, since in the Din Torah you won't get it back, so therefore you abandon hope. Now, in order for something to be able to contract tumah, it has to be a complete item. If it's incomplete, it's not yet susceptible to tumah. And how do you complete it? You knock the last nail in and so on. But if certain things that even if you just thought in your mind, it's good enough, that completes the item. For example, a piece of leather. If you look at it and you say, I'm not going to do anything more. I'm not going to trim it or anything else. I'm happy to use it as a tablecloth or as a table as the top of a table, then that means you completed this item and now it's susceptible to tumah. Even though you did nothing physically, it's just in your mind. But in order to do that, you have to be the owner. So we're going to discuss if a Ganav steals a piece of leather or a Gazlan steals a piece of leather and they had a mind, what happens then? And we're going to say that it only is effective if the Ganav becomes the owner, if there was Yush. So we're going to have an argument. When is a person more readily miyayish? By a Ganav or by a Gazlan? Because you can argue by a Gazlan, you know who the crook is, so you might take him to court. You're not going to abandon hope. A Ganav, you have no idea who robbed you, so you give up. Or you say the other way around. The Gazlan is not scared of me, so I'm not going to be taken to court. I'm scared of him. I'm intimidated by the Gazlan. But by a Ganav, you say, okay, I don't know who the Ganav is, but eventually I'll find the Ganav and I'll take him to court. I'm not scared. They're scared. They came in the middle of the night or when nobody was around. So says the Gemara. Oirois. Tonight we learn how to learn the Mishnah. Oirois Balabais hide from a Balabais. Machshava metamas. As soon as the owner thought, no, it's complete, that makes it tameh. Bishul Abdan, a tanner, ain't machshava metamas. By a tanner, the machshava does not end the job. Shel Gazlan. Now, what about a Gazlan? Ein machshava metamasin. By Gazlan, you don't abandon, you don't give up hope because you know who the Gazlan is. So therefore, the Gazlan has no ability to make it susceptible to it. But v'shel Ganav machshava metamasin. But a Ganav, you abandon hope. You have no idea who the Ganav is. So the Rabbanon hold that you're miyayish.
The Ganav you do.
Sorry,
miyayish.
You abandon hope. By a Ganav, you abandon hope, but because you have no idea who to chase after. But by a Gazlan, you don't abandon hope. You try to go to court and so on. Rab Shimon disagrees. He says, Chiluv advorim, the contrary. Shel Gazlan, when it comes to a Gazlan, the Gazlan is so brazen, you're intimidated from the Gazlan. Machshav metamason, you give up hope straight away, you abandon it. So Ganav, Ganav, you don't abandon it so quickly because you think, let me try. Let's see if we can find the Ganav. We should learn say they don't give a hope. So come along Ula, we have an argument in Ula and Rabbah how to understand the argument between the Rabbanon and Rab Shimon. Ula says, Machlek is their argument regarding a Ganav and a Gazlan is only Bistam. We don't know. We're saying the laws of probability. So one says probably by a Ganav you abandon hope. The other one says probably by a Gazlan you're miyayish. I will be a dua if we know for a fact that the person was miyayish. He said clearly, I give up hope. But even hakol yeyish kind of makes no difference. Ganav, Gazlan, of course you abandon hope, and the person can keep it. Rabbah disagrees. He says, "But you do nami machlekes." Even if you heard the guy say, "I give up hope, I abandon hope," nevertheless, it's not a yerush. You know why? Because we don't believe that the person actually means it. The person is frustrated, so they make these comments. They don't really mean it, so it's not a real yerush. Don't argue with the Ula. It says clearly in the Mishnah, Kavash like him. It says in the Mishnah, the only reason why that the Ganav or the Gazlan, we say that their thoughts are not final. If the owner didn't abandon hope. Seems timer delay only didn't abandon hope. If they did abandon hope, if they abandon hope, then it belongs to that person. So we see that what Yehush, according to everybody, is affected by Ganav and Gazlan. So it's a proof to Ula. Amalei, so Rabbah says back, Anan, we interpret the Mishnah, the same words, but we interpret differently. Not that because they weren't miyayish, the fisher ain't yeyish lebailim. We learn because they don't mean it. They don't mean it. And because they don't mean it, that's why it's not considered a yeyish. Talking about it further, I hold that there's no yeyish at all, whether they knew about it, but even when we heard by one of them, by the Ganav or Gazlan, there's no yesh, and that's the argument which one. Says the Gemara. We have two questions, the Gemara, and we're going to have the same two questions on the other side of the page on another piece. So tonight we learned in our Mishnah, they took the donkey, they seized the donkey, and then they give you another donkey. And the Mishnah says you can keep it. Now the Mishnah says muchsin and listim, two kinds of robbers. So obviously muchsin is a Gazlan, brazen, and listim is a Ganav. Okay, so now now the Mishnah says in both cases you can keep it. How's that possible? We just had an argument either by Ganav you abandon hope or by Gazlan, but not by both. So Mani, who's also our Mishnah? If it's the Rabbanon Kasha Gazlan. So why Muchsin? Can you keep it? The Rabbanon hold that people don't abandon hope by Muchsin. And Rab Shimon, if Rab Shimon Kasha Ganav. Rab Shimon says that people don't abandon hope by Ganav. How can Mishnah says listen, you abandon hope? So it makes sense according to Ula what it says. Be a dua koni if we know for a fact that he's miyash. It works, it's effective. So how can I do? Mishnah about that we heard the person say I abandon hope. So it's effective in all cases. Leave it a happen with everybody. Rabba says by Yidu is also machlekes. I mean, he holds even if we know for a fact that he's miyash, we don't take it seriously. So Hamani, who's the author of our Mishnah? Loi Rabbanan v'loi Rab Shimon. It's neither. Because our Mishnah says that in both cases, Ganef and Gazlan, you abandon. Says the Gemara, Belistim Mezuyin. Both cases are a Gazlan. Muhsin is a regular Gazlan, and Listim means an armed bandit. So because they're both Gazlanin, follows up Shimon who says by a Gazlan we abandon hope, we give up, we're scared of them. And therefore that's the Mishnah is only talking about a Gazlan. So the Gemara, Gazlan, so what do you mean it's two kinds of Gazlan? It says, yes, today Gazlan, two kinds of Gazlan. One that is not armed and one that is armed. And to tell you, we start off with a lesser kind of a Gazlan and say that, that you abandon hope, and surely the worst kind of Gazlan, you abandon hope. So touch my next question. We learned previously, it says clearly Ganef and a Gazlan, and Anos. An Anos is somebody who forces you to sell them an item. They pay you the money. You are a recalcitrant seller. In fact, you have no interest in selling it, but they force it upon you. But it says clearly Ganef and a Gazlan. Now the bride says they own it, and Hegdesh and Hegdesh, if they steal something from you, they turn around and make it Hegdesh, it's a valid Hegdesh. You know why? Because you abandon hope. You abandon hope. And it's Shinei Hashemi, because before it was Chulin, now it's Hegdesh or Shinei Rishus, and therefore it's good. Now it says Ganef and Gazlan. Who holds up both of them? You abandon hope. We learned before an argument. One of them. The question is which one? And it says clearly Ganef and Gazlan. You probably abandon hope, and therefore the Ganef can keep it, and the Gazlan keep it. The Trumas of Truma, the Truma is valid. Masos and Maisa, and the Maisa is Maisa Mani. Who's the author? Irabanan Kasha Gazlan. Rabbanan is the person from Gazlan, and Irab Shimon Kashi Ganef. So basically, if we follow Ulu, who said that we heard clearly that they enunciated a year, you do a kani, you do a hakali. So here also we heard that the person said, I abandon hope, and it goes to everybody. El Rabba according to Rabba, the Amr said, we do a nami machlekes, that even we do as an argument, Hamani, who is the author of this Bryce, Loi Rabbanan v'loi Rab Shimon. So we give the same answer as before. Hachanami listed Mizuyin. There's no Ganef. The word Ganef here means a robber, but an armed robber. Or a Gazlan. The word Ganef actually means a Gazlan, and the next word Gazlan means an armed Gazlan. So and Rav follows Rav Shimon who says by Gazlan you abandon hope. So they're both the same. So the answer today, Gavne Gazlan, two kinds of Gazlan. Uri Boim is saying, Mark gives a new answer. There's a third opinion. Rebbe holds that in all cases you abandon hope. Gazlan, once you had a break-in, you don't think that you'll ever get it back. The Rebbe says, Ganef ki Gazlan. Rebbe said the following words: a Ganef is like a Gazlan. Now, there are two ways of understanding that. Either a Ganef is like a Gazlan that the rabbis hold that a person is not miyayish, because you know who it is. So Rebbe is saying that in all cases you never miyayish. Or you can learn that a Ganef is like a Gazlan of Rab Shimon that says that you are miyayish, and Rebbe is saying that in all cases you're miyayish, which is the way that we're leaning, that Rebbe holds that in all cases you're miyayish. And therefore, our Mishnah is this Bryce is Rebbe who holds that whether you're a Ganef, whether you're Gazlan, everybody abandons hope. The Kaimelan ki Gazlan of Shimon. We could conclude that Rebbe, when he says that a Ganef is like a Gazlan, he meant like Rab Shimon. Now, tomorrow we'll now analyze. Gufa, let's analyze what Rebbe said. Rebbe says, I say Ganef Gazlan. Our question is, ki Gazlan de Rabbanan Kama? Did he mean like a Gazlan de Rabbanan? The like Kani? And you are not koinen, in other words, that you don't abandon hope. I did make a Gazlan of Shimon, and you're always abandoning hope. The Kani. Toshma coming here. Says in our Mishnah, same questions again. Not L'muchsin, who the author of our Mishnah is, who the author of the Bryce is. Says that if the Muchsin tax collector came in, Chamoy, and seized your donkey, man, who's the author? Rabbanan Kashi Gazlan. If the Rabbanan by a Gazlan, you don't abandon hope. How come you can keep it? And by Muchsin, Rab Shimon Kashi Ganef. And if it's Rab Shimon, a Ganef he holds, you don't abandon hope. How come it says that you can keep it? Yeah, if you told me Rebbe holds like Rebbe holds in all cases, you abandon hope like a Gazlan of Rab Shimon, and he holds a Ganef is like a Gazlan. Then the Kone you are Koine Hamani Rebbe, the author of this our Mishnah is Rebbe. That's why you're Koine. Liamber ki Gazlan Rabbanon, he holds like a Gazlan Rabbanon. The Loi Kone, you're not Koine Hamani. So who's the author of our Mishnah? Loi Rebbe Rab Shimon. The Loi Rabbanon is nobody. So we answer. Like we said before, we're talking about two kinds of Gazlanim, no Ganef here. And it follows Rab Shimon. Gazlan is not a Gazlan. So we answer today, Gavni Gazlan, two kinds of Gazlan. Toshma coming here. The second Bryce we learned before. Haganav Gazlan Vanas, these three people, Hegdesh and Hegdesh, they steal and then they make it Hegdesh as valid, Trumasal, Truma, Masos, and Meiser. Mani, who's the author of that? Makes no distinction between Ganav and Gazlan. Irabon and Kashi Gazlan. Why Gazlan? You didn't abandon hope. And Irab Shimon Kashi Ganav, you didn't abandon hope. But the Yamishlemer that Rebbe, Ganav ki Gazan Reb Shimon Kama, that they meant that a Ganav like Gazan Shimon that you always abandon hope. Shemachi Karas Vekoina. Eliyam Ganav ki Gazan Rabbanon. How many who's also by Mishnah? If you hold that Rebbe holds that you never abandon hope, never abandon hope. So who's also by Mishnah that says that the Bryce mean that you're always abandoning hope? Ganav and Gazan. Or says again, the listim is Zuin of Shimon of Shimon. Yehochiv so Heine Gazan today Gavin Gazan. So no proof one way or another. So far. Again, that's impossible. Ravashi never spoke to Rabba in his life, so maybe it's a different Ravashi because we did learn a Taisus previously the two Ravashis, or maybe a different Rabba. We had a few days ago was another person called Rabba Zuti, the big one, Zuti the small one. Both were his names. Mini giant. Toshma, come in here. We learned a few days ago the Masni Rebbe Reb Shimon. Somebody stole and he died, left behind for his kids. So we said that the kids don't have to give it back if it's after years. But if it's an item, for example, property that everybody constantly, every time they walk by the property, say, oh, that's stolen property that the uncle stole, and so on. So for cover of their father, they should give it back. So the Rebbe said to his son of Shimon, we don't mean only property. I'll fill a pora, cow, that plows, or chamar, donkey, and you walk after it. Anything of significance, and people look at it and they're reminded that this is a stolen goods. I feel they're what chayav and lahas if they cover it, and give it back. Time, but the only reason why you should give it back is when they cover it in. Halav cover it in. If not for that, you don't have to give it back. They can keep it. Why? Why can they keep it? Because definitely the owner abandoned hope. So clearly, Rebbe holds that by a Ganef and a Gazlan, they abandon hope. Shmamino, Rebbe, Gazlan, Reb Shimon Kama. Shmamino, that's what Rebbe meant. Then we looked about this bee. Even if it's a whole swarm of bees, the Kenyan, the Rabbanano, you don't really own the bees because the bees are constantly flying around. So your relationship, your ownership of the bees is really very tenuous. Even though the Mefarshim ask, if the bees are sitting on a beehive, when you lift the beehive, it's a kinyan hakba, and mahatayra, it becomes yours. Why is it tenuous? But nevertheless, the Gemara seems to say that it's a tenuous relationship, and therefore, I would have thought, here, kivan the rabbanan ba'almahu, the ownership is very weak. I feel here we don't have to wait to hear that you abandon hope. We can assume you abandon hope because you don't really own it in the first place. Kamashlan, that's why I come to tell you that im this yaishabayim, only if you heard the owners get abandon hope. Yes, Eloi. The manager you believe people that are not qualified to be Adam are believed to say where the bees came from. You say, well, ask, the owners were chasing after them. And we have this concept of if somebody might not be kosher for Adis, but they're casually saying something, without realizing that we're listening carefully to what they're saying, then we can trust them. Because if they would know that they're being, listened to and this is Adis, they might concoct some kind of a story. But they're talking casually and they don't think it means anything. We listen to what they have to say. And that's what happened there. The person was running after it. And then after the Rashi says, they said, oh, these bees came from that property. This whole concept of a casual speaker is not believed. No one's believed. If a husband disappeared and the woman is an aguna, and then somebody a kid casually said that I remember last night we were asked to go out and dig a grave for so and so and so, without realizing he's saying ages, just telling a story. Then we release her and we say that she can get married, and we'll rely on that testimony because it was a casual testimony. Are you telling me that generally speaking we don't believe casual testimonies? But in the we just learned about the bees. But he's just telling a story. So Rav Ashi says, look, where it's only a question of Durabanan, we will trust casual testimony. But where it's a din of the Torah, we need proper edus. The story of the person, he was telling a story. We had him work so he says, I remember I was a young kid. I was taken on my father's shoulders. He took me out of school one day. He put me on, he removed my clothes, and he put me in the mikveh, so I should be tar. I can eat truma that evening. But Chanim continues the story further. And all my friends, they separated from me. I shouldn't become tamei. But they nicknamed me Yochanan Oichel Chalas. And as a result of that, Rebbe elevated him to position of Kuna. Even though he was only a child, he wasn't a kosher witness, but he was telling us a story casually. He didn't realize that we're listening to the story. So Rabash says again. And kuna, you say matay no, but truma rabban. How far did we take the kuna? Only we allowed him to eat truma of fruits, which is the rabban. Or Rashi says truma bezman hazeh. According to the opinion that says Israel is no longer a holy place, kedusha l'shoyna kitcha l'shaita v'loy kitcha l'salavay, then there's no truma from the Torah today. Back to big machlekes of today, there's truma from the Torah or not. Says the Gemara, Vakati writes the Torah not, ki also Rav Dimi Rav Chana Katigna, Rav Chana from Katigna came along and said, I'm not Rav Acha Katigna, Mishtoi told the following story, Mais about him Shuvalevi, I'm not others say Mais about Rebbe. But Tinik Echad Kid Shahayim Masifit to me was telling us a story. The din is if a woman is taken captive, we're worried that the goyim perhaps raped her and so on and so forth, so she cannot marry a kohen. But this kid came along and said, Anivi Imin Ishbein we were both taken captive. Every time I was always with my mother. If I ever went to draw water, I constantly look back to my mother, make sure that she's safe. Look at 18, I went to gather wood, I watched my mother. And Rebbe, based on that, allowed her to marry a kohen. So we see this is a question of the Torah. Because if she lived with a goy, she cannot marry a kohen from the Torah. And yet we rely on the testimony of a kid who's killing us casually. What happened? Answers the Gemara, Shavui Kilo. When it comes to kidnapping, it's miracle. We don't know for a fact anything happened. It's only a suffix. And therefore, we are lenient. Then we say, you shouldn't cut off the branch. Tonight, Bezin, this is a condition of the Bezin, that part of the society is that we have to tolerate certain things, that a person can trespass somebody else's field, and cut down the branch if all the bees are sitting there, to save his swarm of bees. And then he has to reimburse him, from the profits he makes from the bees, he has to reimburse the guy. The Tanai Bezin, another Tanai Bezin, now this is an interesting law that we have. We'll have it in the next blot. And that is, one person is walking with a barrel of wine, another person with a barrel of honey. In those days, honey was much more valuable than wine. And by law, if the guy with the wine decides to be a mensch and he pours out his wine and the guy with the honey's barrel cracked and the honey was flowing out, so he poured out his wine and he put the barrel underneath to trap all the honey, and now he incurred a loss. And the halacha says the guy with the honey doesn't have to pay him a cent. Nobody asks you to do it. He doesn't have to pay him a cent. He has to just pay him for the time and maybe the use of his barrel, and that's it. However, Rav Shmuel says that there's a Tanai Bezin in this case, that you have to pour out your wine and accept the honey, and that guy has to reimburse you for the wine that you lost. And Taisus previously explains that they're not really arguing, but Taisus Mishnah, but Taisus is that the Mishnah is talking about he did it on his own. He did it on his own. He doesn't have to reimburse you. Here we're talking about the owner of the honey wants you to get rid of the wine so he can use a barrel, and you refuse. The Bezin will pass can get rid of your wine, but you will be reimbursed. In other words, if the owner of the honey asks you to do it, then you get reimbursed for the wine that you lost. So you should, that even whether you like it or not, we're going to force you to pour out your wine and save his honey. And you get paid for it from his honey. But if you have a donkey and he has a donkey, his donkey is carrying flax, your donkey is carrying wood, his donkey died and something fell on the ground. So you're carrying wood, which is a lot cheaper. Get rid of the wood, take his flax and carry it. Take his flax, and you'll get reimbursed from his flax. So this is conditions. Yeshua said, you want to live as a society, we have to learn to be tolerant and make certain leeway, certain leniency so that people can survive. Mishnah. Okay, I recognize my items that are in somebody's house. They're stolen from me. And there's a rumor that these items, people already knew that these items are stolen. Then he goes to the buyer. We're not accusing the buyer of being the ganef. We're accusing the buyer of being the person who bought from the ganef. He goes to the buyer and he says, give me back. So the lekeach swears how much it cost him. He paid the ganef, and the original owner takes it back and has to reimburse the lekeach. And then he goes to the ganef and collects his money. Now, what right does he have to go to lekeach to take the item back? Lekeach bought it, and it's Yushin or Shus, that. What right does he have to go? So we're going to learn the Gemara a concept called takonos. The other way around. L'chayder, if it's my stolen item, then I should be able to take it back. Why in the world do I have to pay? Why does the owner of the item have to pay the buyer? You should tell the buyer, you bought it from a ganef, you go deal with a ganef. Why should I have to pay you, reimburse you? So the Gemara says later, you're right, you don't have to. But it made a special takana called takanas ashuk. Because if we don't do that, people will stop, the whole commerce will stop because people stop buying things. They're always scared, maybe it's stolen goods, and then I'll lose everything. But this way, he's an innocent person who bought, then he has to give it back to the owner, but the owner has to reimburse him, and the owner has to deal with the gunner, take him to the interior, whatever it takes. The imlav. But if there were no rumors that it was stolen, we're going to say, love kol hemlush. We're going to say, how do we know that these items were stolen? Maybe you're the one who sold it to somebody who sold it on, and maybe you regretted selling it, so you made up, you cut to the story that it was stolen because you want it back. So lavko, you're not believed. Maybe you sold it to somebody else, and this guy bought it, and you just changed your mind. You made up the story. So what? By having these stories, the rumor going around that it was stolen, that makes it more believable. So what if there's a rumor going around? Maybe the original owner sold it, and he's the one now who started all these rumors. But who knew? He's the one who made all these rumors. Says the Gemara, people were in his house, they were sleeping there as guests. So they heard these screams and they all woke up. And he was shouting, there was a robber here, intruder here, and he stole one of my vessels. So that's how we know that it's real. So the Gemara, no, maybe he made a whole ruse. Maybe he invited these guests in his house, all part of his plan, all part of his stratagem. He invited them to the house. In the middle of the night, he woke up screaming, I was stolen, so everybody thinks it was a Ganeva, and then he can get his books back. And he'll say that it was stolen. There's another detail here. They found a tunnel underneath his house, that these people that you invited to your house to sleep as guests, you don't even know who they are, they actually dug a tunnel prior to that into your house. And in the middle of the night, they woke up, they robbed you clean, and they escaped through this tunnel. The fact that we see a tunnel gives credibility to your story that actually you had a break-in. Otherwise, we wouldn't believe you. Was a tunnel there, people slept in his house. Yotzu left, they had all these sacks of kalim on their shoulders. And everyone says now, these were stolen. Says the Gemara, okay, but maybe they stole utensils, but nobody mentioned books. They said the books and utensils were stolen. Maybe he was small svarim, and he's now taking big svarim, because he's claiming big ones. So therefore, what he's taking is not really, what was stolen, and it was the only thing that he actually sold and changed his mind. Plenty. They actually nominated the names of the svarim. So I didn't have a ticket, maybe, but these were old ones. Maybe he's claiming new ones. Maybe what was stolen were old books that worth in those days was worth a lot less than new ones, and the new ones is what he's claiming now because that's what he sold and he wants them back. People say we recognize these foreign, we recognize them. Did Rav say that? Rav said there's a famous thing called Kamen B'Drabane. A person does an act that deserves to be killed, and then he stole at the same time, you don't pay for the stealing. If somebody breaks into your house, the din is a very interesting law. Habola hargich hashkim lahargim. We had a giving psachim, we'll have a Sanhedrin. If somebody breaks into your house, and it's quite possible that they're prepared that if you come and confront them, they're going to kill you. So you're allowed to kill them first. So this is because they put their lives on the line. If they steal, they don't have to pay for the stealing because Kamen B'Drabane. So if there was a tunnel there, then why pay for the Geneva? What right does he have to take the Geneva back? The Ghana then can keep the Geneva, and he sold it on to that person. That guy can keep it. Why take it back? So when I ask a question, Bob Machtev came with the cave, and Notl came, took the cave, and the Yotza Potter, my time at Bedomi Kananu, with the blood, the Ghana now is a new owner. Says the Gemara, Hani Mili, when is that talking about the Kanunu, the Bob Machteres? The guy broke into your house by coming through a tunnel. The guy was prepared that in case you confront him, he's prepared to defend himself and kill you. Hani here is the other way around. They came in, you invited them as guests. You weren't aware that they dug a hole or some tunnel there in the living room. So you invited them as guests. They escaped through the tunnel. So they never put their lives on the line. Keeping the Muslim of Shaykh Talallah. No. Amar versus Rabba. When is all this said? When do we have to go through such detail and this minutia that make sure that everyone heard about the stolen things and nominate what was stolen before he has the right to go to the buyer and say, give it back to me? Also limka kelev. We don't trust him because we know that he generally sells these things. Now suddenly it says it was stolen. Prove that these were stolen. But a guy who never sells his kelim, and suddenly we find that his kelim is somebody else's house, We readily believe in that it was stolen. We don't need to bring all this proof that we just said over here. We don't need to find a tunnel in the house, all that. We don't have to go into such detail. So you wonder why, but it could still be even a guy who never sells this. Maybe suddenly he's desperate for money, so he sold it, and then now he's making up a story. Now he got his money back or something. He's making up a story that it was stolen because he wants the goods back. But we already heard one thing we do need is we need to, the rumors or stories going around town abounding that this person's items were stolen. Okay, we're going to pause for a minute, and if anyone